You're embarrassing me, Matthew hissed through clenched teeth, his fingers tightening around his wine glass. The crystal stemware caught the ambient lighting of Le Petit Jardin, one of the most expensive restaurants in Boston, sending prisms dancing across our pristine white tablecloth. His mother, Brooke, sat across from us, her crimson lips curved in a smirk that made my stomach churn. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. After 15 years of marriage, I knew this moment would define everything. I can't pay for this dinner, Matthew. You know I've been helping my sister with her medical bills. I don't have $3,000 to spare right now. The truth was, I had been quietly building my escape fund, squirreling away money from my job as an interior designer. Leah's cancer treatments were real, yes, but they weren't consuming all my resources as I'd led Matthew to believe. Each time he demanded I pay for another extravagant dinner or designer suit, I added more to my hidden savings account. Always excuses, Brooke chimed in, swirling her wine. Matthew told me you've been quite successful with your little decorating business. Surely you can treat your mother-in-law to one special dinner. Her voice dripped with the same condescension I'd endured for years. I looked around the restaurant, taking in the other diners in their expensive attire, the soft classical music, the perfectly arranged table settings. Everything about this place screamed old money and privilege, Brooke's natural habitat. She had orchestrated this entire evening, knowing exactly what she was doing. I said no. My voice was quiet but firm. The change in Matthew's expression was immediate. His carefully maintained facade of sophistication cracked, revealing the rage beneath. In one fluid motion, he lifted his glass of Cabernet Sauvignon and threw the contents directly in my face. The wine was cold against my skin, staining my cream-colored blouse crimson. Gasps erupted from nearby tables. Brooke's laugh cut through the shocked silence like a knife. "Pay the bill," Matthew demanded, "or this marriage ends right here." I reached up slowly, wiping the wine from my eyes. My hands were steady, surprisingly steady. 15 years of diminishment, of financial manipulation, of walking on eggshells. All of it crystallized in this moment. I could smell the wine on my skin, feel it dripping onto my collar, hear the whispers from other diners. But instead of shame, I felt something else rising within me. Clarity. I stood up, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "You're right about one thing, Matthew. This ends here." I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. With deliberate movements, I opened my camera app and took a photo of my wine-soaked appearance. Then I started recording. "What do you think you're doing?" Matthew sputtered, reaching for my phone. I stepped back, keeping the camera trained on him. "Creating evidence," I replied, my voice stronger than I'd ever heard it. "Would you like to throw something else at me? Perhaps explain to everyone here why you think it's acceptable to assault your wife when she refuses to pay for your mother's extravagant demands?" Brooke's smirk vanished. "You ungrateful little—" "Mrs. Harrison," a new voice interrupted. The restaurant's manager had appeared at our table, his expression grave. "I'm going to have to ask you and your son to leave immediately." "Ma'am?" He turned to me. "Would you like us to call the police?" Matthew stood up so quickly his chair toppled backward. "You wouldn't dare." I kept recording. "Try me." What happened next would change everything, not just for me, but for the dozens of witnesses in that restaurant, for the legal system that would soon become involved, and for the women who would later tell me my story gave them courage. But in that moment, all I knew was that I had finally found my voice. The wine was still dripping down my neck when I made the call that would start my new life. But first, I had one more thing to say to the man who thought he could break me with a glass of wine and 15 years of control. "You know what the funny thing is, Matthew? I've already paid for this dinner. I've been paying for everything for 15 years. My dignity, my freedom, my sense of self. But not anymore. Check your joint account tomorrow. I think you'll find it makes for some interesting reading." The look on his face told me he finally understood. I wasn't just ending our marriage. I was taking back my life. The police officer's name was Andrea Taylor, and she had kind eyes that didn't match her stern expression. We sat in a quiet corner of the precinct as she reviewed my statement, the wine on my blouse now dried to a dull burgundy stain. "Mrs. Harrison." "Rebecca," I corrected her. Just Rebecca Porter. I'm going back to my maiden name. She nodded, making a note. Rebecca, you mentioned this isn't the first incident? My hands tightened around the paper cup of lukewarm coffee they'd given me. Through the precinct windows, I could see dawn breaking over Boston, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. I hadn't slept, but I felt more awake than I had in years. The wine throwing? That was new, I said. Matthew always preferred less visible methods. Financial control, emotional manipulation, isolation. Did you know I haven't seen my best friend Claire in 3 years? He convinced me she was jealous of our marriage, trying to sabotage it. I believed him. I took a sip of coffee, grimacing at the bitter taste. But the real masterpiece was how he handled money. Every time my design business succeeded, he found ways to drain my accounts. Emergency investments, family obligations, guilt trips about not contributing enough to our future. Meanwhile, his mother orchestrated expensive dinners and vacations that I was expected to fund, while they both reminded me how lucky I was to be part of their world. Officer Taylor's pen moved steadily across her notepad. And last night, you mentioned something about a joint account? A small smile crossed my face. Ah, yes. That was my insurance policy. You see, 2 years ago, I started documenting everything. Every transaction, every manipulation, every incident. I opened a separate account and began moving small amounts of money. Nothing that would trigger suspicion, just enough to build a safety net. I also kept records of how Matthew used our joint account for personal expenses while claiming business deductions. The IRS would be very interested in those records. That's why you were recording at the restaurant? Partly, but mostly because I knew what would happen when Matthew checked the joint account this morning. Last night, while he was busy trying to intimidate me at the restaurant, my lawyer was executing the paperwork I'd prepared months ago. Every questionable transaction, every tax discrepancy, every piece of evidence, it's all been submitted to the relevant authorities. The officer leaned back, studying me. You've been planning this for a long time. 2 years, 3 months, and 12 days. I set down the coffee cup. That's how long it took me to realize that the shame I felt wasn't mine to carry. It belonged to them. My phone buzzed. Another message from Matthew. I'd received dozens since leaving the restaurant, watching them evolve from threats to pleading to desperate bargaining. I showed Officer Taylor the latest one. Baby, please, we can work this out. I'll get help. Don't destroy everything we've built. What we built, I said quietly, was a prison. It just had very expensive walls. A knock on the door interrupted us. Another officer entered, his expression serious. Miss Porter, we have some visitors who'd like to speak with you. One is Brooke Harrison's lawyer. The other, he hesitated, says she's your sister-in-law, Catherine Harrison, Matthew's sister. My heart skipped a beat. Catherine, or Kate, as she preferred, was Matthew's younger sister, the black sheep of the Harrison family. She'd been cut off financially 5 years ago after refusing to participate in what she called their toxic dynasty. I hadn't spoken to her since, another relationship Matthew had managed to sever. Kate's here? My voice wavered for the first time that night. Officer Taylor watched me carefully. Would you like to speak with them? I stood up, smoothing my wine-stained blouse. Yes, but first, there's something you need to know about the Harrison family business. Something Kate and I are probably the only ones brave enough, or stupid enough, to tell you. The officer raised an eyebrow. What's that? The real reason Brooke orchestrated that dinner last night. You see, she recently discovered something I've known for months. Her perfect son, my controlling husband, has been embezzling from his own family's foundation. And I have proof of every transaction. As I followed Officer Taylor to the meeting room, I couldn't help but wonder, was I about to find an ally in Kate, or was this another Harrison family trap? What I did know was that the next few minutes would determine not just my future, but potentially the fate of everyone who had ever been caught in the Harrison family's web of manipulation and deceit. I straightened my shoulders and took a deep breath. Whatever was waiting for me behind that door, I was finally ready to face it. After all, I'd already survived their worst, or so I thought. But what Kate was about to tell me would change everything I thought I knew about the past 15 years of my life. Kate looked exactly as I remembered her. Wild curly hair, no makeup, and a defiant glint in her eyes that the Harrisons had never managed to extinguish. She sat alone in the interview room, no sign of Brooke's lawyer. When our eyes met, she stood up and did something that made my breath catch. She hugged me. "I saw the video," she whispered in my ear. "Someone at the restaurant posted it online. You magnificent, brave woman." I pulled back, confused. "The lawyer, gone. I told him I needed a moment alone with my sister-in-law first. He's probably calling Brooke right now, warning her that the black sheep has returned." Kate's smile was sharp. "We don't have much time." We sat down at the table, and Kate pulled out a worn leather notebook. "Remember when I was cut off from the family? Everyone thought it was because I refused to join the family business, to be another puppet in Brooke's show. That was part of it, but not the whole truth." She opened the notebook, revealing pages of handwritten notes and what looked like financial records. "I found something 5 years ago. Something that made Brooke destroy my reputation, and Matthew chose his side. It's about your design business, Rebecca, and about several other small businesses owned by Harrison family spouses over the past 20 years. My throat went dry. What about them? They were never meant to succeed. In fact, their failure was the point. Kate's voice was gentle, but her words hit like physical blows. "Brooke and Matthew, they've been running this scheme for years. They find successful, independent women, bring them into the family through marriage, and then systematically drain their businesses and personal assets. The family reputation and connections lure these women in, and then the manipulation begins." My hands started shaking. The constant expenses, the luxury dinners, the demanded contributions, the guilt about family obligations. It's all orchestrated. They push until the business fails or the woman drains her accounts trying to keep up. Then, once she's financially dependent, they have complete control. I thought about all the other Harrison wives I'd met over the years, Matthew's cousins' wives, family friends. How many of them had been victims of this scheme? How many businesses had been destroyed? But why? I asked, though part of me already knew the answer. Power, control, and, Kate hesitated, money laundering. The Harrison Family Foundation? It's not just about embezzlement. They use these failing businesses to clean money from less legitimate family enterprises. Each bankruptcy, each financial crisis, it's all documented and justified. Perfect cover for moving funds around. I felt sick. That's why Brooke was so insistent about me paying for everything through my business accounts. Exactly. But you did something they didn't expect, didn't you? Kate's eyes sparkled. You kept records. You built an escape fund. You survived. And now they're scared, I realized. That's why Brooke orchestrated that dinner. She found out about my documentation. She found out you were working with an accountant who used to handle some of their legitimate business interests. Malcolm Jones? They've been trying to locate all copies of your records. The name hit me like a thunderbolt. Malcolm had approached me 6 months ago, claiming he'd noticed irregularities in how the Harrison family interacted with my business accounts. He'd helped me understand the patterns, gather evidence. A knock on the door made us both jump. Officer Taylor entered, her expression serious. "Rebecca, we just got a call from your sister Leah's nurse. There's been an incident at the hospital." My heart stopped. What kind of incident? Someone tried to access her room claiming to be family. When they were denied entry, they became aggressive. Security intervened, but... Matthew, Kate and I said simultaneously. "We need to move quickly," Kate said, standing. "There's more you need to know. But right now, we need to get to the hospital. Leah isn't just your sister, Rebecca. She's a witness. 3 years ago, before her cancer diagnosis, she worked as a bookkeeper for one of the Harrison subsidiary companies. The pieces started falling into place. Leah's sudden illness, the timing of her cancer diagnosis right after she'd left the Harrison company, Matthew's insistence on being involved in her medical care. Oh, God, I whispered. They've been monitoring her all this time, haven't they? Using her illness to control me? Kate squeezed my hand. We're going to end this, Rebecca. But first, we need to get to Leah. As we rushed out of the police station, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The message contained only 4 words, but they made my blood run cold. You should have paid. What waited for us at the hospital would test everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and the true price of freedom. But this time, I wasn't facing it alone. The hospital corridor seemed endless as Kate and I ran toward Leah's room, Officer Taylor close behind us. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows, making everything feel surreal. My wine-stained blouse drew curious glances from hospital staff, but I barely noticed. All I could think about was my sister. Leah had always been the strong one. Even through her cancer treatments, she'd maintained her quiet dignity, her gentle humor. Now I understood why she'd given me those odd, searching looks whenever Matthew visited her in the hospital. She'd known. She'd known all along. We rounded the corner to her floor and found 2 security guards outside her room. My heart lurched when I saw the disarray in the hallway, a knocked-over cart, scattered medical supplies. But it was the sound coming from Leah's room that made me break into a run. My sister's voice, clear and angry. "I told you to get out!" I burst into the room and froze. Leah was sitting up in her hospital bed, thin but alert, her headscarf slightly askew. Brooke Harrison stood at the foot of her bed, immaculate in designer clothes that probably cost more than Leah's monthly medical bills. But it was the third person in the room that made my blood run cold. Malcolm Jones, the accountant who'd helped me gather evidence against the Harrisons. He stood beside Brooke, looking nothing like the sympathetic ally who'd guided me through documenting the family's financial abuse. His expression was cold, professional. "Rebecca," Brooke's voice dripped honey-coated venom. "How good of you to join us. We were just having a lovely chat with your sister about old times, about loyalty, about family secrets." Leah's eyes met mine, and I saw a lifetime of unspoken words pass between us. "They tried to buy my silence," she said quietly. "Again. The first time was 3 years ago, wasn't it?" I moved to my sister's side, taking her hand. "It was cold. Right before your diagnosis." Malcolm cleared his throat. "Ms. Porter, perhaps we could discuss this privately. There's been a misunderstanding about certain documents." "You mean the documents you helped me collect?" I cut him off. "Tell me, Malcolm, was that Brooke's idea? Get close to me, pretend to help me build a case, all while reporting back to the family? Figure out exactly what evidence I had?" "It's more complicated than that," he started. But Kate's laugh from the doorway cut him off. "Is it, Malcolm? Because it seems pretty simple to me." She walked in, Officer Taylor beside her. "You help the family identify threats, then help neutralize them. How many other wives have you done this to? How many other businesses have you helped destroy?" Brooke's composure cracked, just slightly. "Catherine, still playing detective, I see. Did you tell Rebecca why you really started investigating the family? About your own failed business ventures? You mean the business you and Matthew sabotaged?" Kate's voice was steady. "The one you destroyed because I wouldn't play along with your schemes?" "Yes, Brooke. I told her everything." Leah's hand tightened around mine. "Becca," she whispered. "The notebook, in my bedside drawer." I reached over and pulled open the drawer. Inside was a worn leather journal, similar to Kate's, but older, more worn. Brooke took a step forward, but Officer Taylor moved to block her path. "3 years ago," Leah said, her voice gaining strength, "I found irregularities in the books. Not just in the company I worked for, but patterns across multiple Harrison businesses. I started keeping records." She nodded at the journal. "Then I started getting sick. At first, just small things. Dizzy spells, fatigue. When I finally got diagnosed." "Are you suggesting—" Brooke's voice was dangerous. "I'm not suggesting anything." Leah met her gaze steadily. "I'm stating facts. I kept copies of everything I found. The original records are safe with my lawyer, sealed with instructions to be opened if anything happens to me." "Did you really think I wouldn't protect myself? Protect my sister?" Malcolm moved toward the door, but Officer Taylor stepped into his path. "Going somewhere?" What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Brooke reached into her designer handbag. Kate shouted a warning. I threw myself in front of Leah's bed, but it wasn't a weapon Brooke pulled out. It was a phone. "Matthew," she spoke into it, her voice ice cold. "It's time for Plan B." The hospital room's lights flickered, then went out completely. In the sudden darkness, I heard Leah gasp, Kate curse, and the sound of running footsteps in the hallway. When the emergency lights came on seconds later, Brooke and Malcolm were gone, but they'd left something behind. Leah's medical chart with a new page added to the front. What was written there would change everything we thought we knew about my sister's illness, the Harrison family's reach, and just how far they'd go to protect their secrets. I picked up the chart with trembling hands, and as I read, I finally understood why Matthew had been so insistent on controlling Leah's medical care. The truth was far worse than anything we'd imagined. The emergency lights cast an eerie glow over Leah's medical chart as I read, my hands shaking. Dr. Emily Jones, no relation to Malcolm, thank God, stood beside me, her expression growing darker with each page we reviewed. These treatment protocols, she said, pointing to a series of entries, they're not standard for your type of lymphoma, Leah. In fact, she flipped through more pages, her frown deepening. Some of these medications shouldn't have been prescribed together at all. The combination would have... She stopped, looking up at Leah with horror. Would have what? I demanded, though part of me already knew. Would have mimicked and exacerbated symptoms of the cancer, Leah finished quietly, making me sicker while making it look natural. Matthew insisted on using their family doctor for my prescriptions, said it was all covered by their private insurance. She laughed bitterly. I knew something was wrong when I started getting worse after each new medication, but by then I was too weak to fight it. Kate was examining the new page Brooke had left. Look at this. It's a liability waiver, backdated 3 years, with Leah's forged signature. They were covering their tracks, creating a paper trail to protect themselves in case anyone started asking questions. Officer Taylor took photos of every page while speaking quietly into her radio. 2 more officers had arrived and were taking statements from the hospital security guards about Brooke and Malcolm's exit. Your original doctor? Dr. Jones said suddenly, before the Harrison family doctor took over. Do you remember their name? Leah closed her eyes, thinking. Dr. Patel. Anjali Patel. She seemed concerned when I told her I was switching doctors, tried to warn me about something, but Matthew was there and... She looked at me. That was right after you married him, Becca. I didn't want to cause problems for you. My throat tightened. While I'd been trapped in Matthew's web of financial manipulation, my own sister had been slowly poisoned, and I'd been too blind to see it. The generous offer to cover her medical expenses, his insistence on being involved in her care, the way he'd isolated both of us from our other friends and family, it had all been part of their plan. We need to find Dr. Patel, Kate said firmly. She might have records from before the Harrison doctor took over, something to show Leah's original condition. Already on it, Officer Taylor replied, typing on her phone. And we've got officers looking for Brooke and Malcolm. The hospital security cameras caught them leaving in a black SUV, heading east. They'll be going to the lake house, I said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at me. The Harrison family lake house in Vermont. It's where they keep their most sensitive documents. Matthew told me once when he'd had too much to drink, said his father taught him that every family needs a vault. Leah started to speak, but suddenly began coughing violently. Dr. Jones rushed to check her vital signs while I held my sister's hand, feeling more helpless than ever. Your numbers are dangerously low, Dr. Jones said after examining Leah. We need to start counteracting these medications immediately. I'm ordering new blood work and calling in a specialist. I have copies, Leah gasped between coughs, of everything, not just the financial records, the original medical reports. She squeezed my hand. In the painting. What painting? Kate asked. The one I gave Becca for her wedding. The lighthouse. Leah's voice was getting weaker. My mind raced back 15 years to my wedding day. Leah had given us a painting of a lighthouse at dawn, one she'd done herself. Matthew had hated it, called it amateurish, but I'd insisted on keeping it. It had hung in my home office ever since, a reminder of my sister's creative spirit. It's hanging in my office, I said, but Matthew is probably at the house by now. Then we need to get there first, Kate declared. Those records could prove everything. The financial fraud, the medical manipulation, all of it. Leah grabbed my arm with surprising strength. Be careful, she whispered. There's something else hidden in that painting. Something I never told anyone. About the day their father really died. A new text lit up my phone. A message from Matthew, with a photo attached. My heart stopped when I opened it. It was a picture of my home office, the wall where Leah's lighthouse painting hung, or used to hang. The photo showed an empty wall, with only a nail remaining. Below it, Matthew had written, "Did you really think I didn't know? Come alone to the lake house. Time to finish this." Dr. Jones's voice seemed to come from far away as she announced Leah's test results. What she said next would force me to make an impossible choice: pursue Matthew and the evidence that could bring down the Harrison family, or stay with my sister through what might be her final hours. But Leah made the choice for me. What she said next would change everything, and finally reveal the true reason the Harrisons had worked so hard to silence her. Leah's heart monitor beeped steadily as she gripped my hand. Dr. Jones had just administered a new treatment to counteract the harmful medications, but my sister's determination seemed to give her renewed strength. Their father, Richard Harrison, Leah's voice was quiet but clear, didn't die of a heart attack like everyone thinks. I was there that day at the family company. I was working late, going through some files Richard had specifically requested I audit. Kate moved closer, her face pale. "I always thought there was something odd about Dad's death. He found something," Leah continued. "Something big. He called me into his office that evening, showed me documents about offshore accounts, shell companies, said he had evidence that Brooke and Matthew were embezzling from the family foundation, using it to launder money from other enterprises. He was going to turn them in." My stomach churned. What happened? Brooke happened. She came in during our conversation. I ducked into the adjacent file room when I heard her voice. Richard and I had already learned to be cautious. Through the door's window, I saw... Leah paused, taking a shaky breath. I saw her put something in his coffee. He collapsed minutes later. "You witnessed our mother murder our father?" Kate's voice cracked. "I took photos with my phone. Got videos of her calmly calling security, playing the grieving wife. I also managed to grab some of the documents Richard had shown me. That's what's hidden in the painting, Becca. Not just company records, but evidence of Richard's murder." Officer Taylor, who had been quietly taking notes, stepped forward. "Why didn't you come forward then?" "Brooke saw me. Not that day, but a week later. Made it very clear what would happen to my sister if I ever spoke up. Then, a few months later, Becca met Matthew." Leah looked at me apologetically. "I tried to warn you, but you were so happy. By the time I realized what they were doing to you, they had already started poisoning me, making sure I stayed quiet, using my illness to control both of us." Dr. Jones checked Leah's latest test results. "The new treatment is working, but slowly. We need to keep her under close observation for at least 24 hours. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Matthew. 1 hour. "Come alone, or the painting burns, along with everything else you care about. Go," Leah said firmly. "I've got Dr. Jones and the police here. Kate can stay with me. You need to end this." "It's not safe," Officer Taylor warned. "We can send a team to the lake house." "No," I said, an idea forming. "Matthew expects me to come alone, and that's exactly what I'll do. But first, I need to make a call." I stepped into the hallway and dialed a number I hadn't used in 3 years. It rang twice before a familiar voice answered. "Rebecca? Is it really you?" "Claire." I fought back tears at hearing my best friend's voice. "Remember when you told me there was something off about Matthew? About the whole Harrison family? I need your help. You still work for the FBI's Financial Crimes Division, right?" 20 minutes later, I was in my car, driving toward the lake house. In my rearview mirror, I could see the unmarked vehicles following at a discreet distance. Claire's team, coordinating with local law enforcement. My hands were steady on the wheel as I rehearsed the plan in my head. What Matthew didn't know was that while he'd been focused on Leah's painting, he'd missed something far more important. Something I'd discovered the night before, when I'd finally gathered the courage to open the locked drawer in Brooke's antique desk at their main house. The contents of that drawer explained everything. Why they'd chosen me, why they'd targeted other successful women over the years, and most importantly, where all the money had really gone. The lake house came into view, its imposing silhouette dark against the setting sun. Matthew's car was parked out front, along with Brooke's SUV. Through the large windows, I could see movement inside. They were waiting for me. I parked and took a deep breath, checking my phone one last time. A message from Kate. Leah's stabilizing. We found Dr. Patel. She's on her way to the hospital with her original records. Go get them, sis. As I walked toward the house, I felt strangely calm. Matthew thought he was drawing me into a trap, but he'd forgotten something crucial about me. Something that Brooke, in all her careful planning, had overlooked. Before I was Matthew's wife, before I was a victim of their schemes, I was Leah Porter's sister, and she hadn't been the only one keeping secrets all these years. I raised my hand to knock, the setting sun casting my shadow long across the porch. What waited for me inside would either be my undoing or my redemption. But first, I had a story to tell Matthew about another hidden painting, one that Brooke never knew existed, but would bring her entire empire crashing down. The lake house door opened before I could knock. Matthew stood there, his usual polished appearance slightly disheveled, his eyes wild. The familiar scent of expensive scotch wafted from him, his father's brand. How fitting. Where is it? I asked calmly, stepping inside. Your sister's amateur painting? He gestured to the living room, where the lighthouse piece leaned against the stone fireplace. Brooke sat in her favorite armchair, looking like she was presiding over a board meeting rather than a hostage situation. Malcolm Jones paced near the windows, checking his phone nervously. Amateur? I allowed myself a small smile. That's what you always said. Never even bothered to look closely at it, did you? Too focused on belittling anything that came from my family. Enough games, Brooke snapped. We know Leah hid documents inside it. Hand over any copies you've made, and we can discuss a mutually beneficial resolution. I walked over to the painting, studying it in the fading light. You know what I always loved about Leah's art? Her attention to detail, the way she layered things. Like this lighthouse. Did you ever notice it's not just one building? There's another structure reflected in the water, but it's slightly different. Almost like what? Matthew demanded. Like she painted two different versions of the truth. The one above the water that everyone sees, and the one below, hidden but still there. I turned to face them. Kind of like your family, isn't it? Brooke stood, her patience visibly thinning. If you think... Richard saw it too, didn't he? I cut her off. The hidden truth. That's why you killed him. The room went deadly silent. Malcolm stopped pacing. Leah told you. Brooke's voice was ice. Well, that was a mistake she won't live to regret. Did you really think we'd let her recover? Those new treatments she's receiving? Let's just say we have friends in many places. My heart clenched, but I kept my expression neutral. Actually, she didn't have to tell me anything. I already knew. You see, Richard Harrison wasn't just consulting with Leah that day. He was building a case, gathering allies, and one of those allies was my father. Matthew took a step forward. What are you talking about? Your father died in a car accident 12 years ago. Did he? I pulled out my phone and opened a photo. This was taken the day before Richard died. Security footage from a cafe in Burlington. I held it up, showing Richard Harrison sitting with my father, documents spread between them. Dad was an forensic accountant. He'd been tracking your family's activities for years. When he got too close, I let the sentence hang. Brooke's composure cracked, just slightly. You're bluffing. Am I? Where do you think I learned to keep such detailed records? To build evidence so carefully? Dad taught me everything before you had him killed. And I've been planning this moment since the day Matthew first asked me out. I turned to my husband. Did you really think it was coincidence that you met me at that charity gala? That I just happened to be the successful businesswoman you were looking for? Matthew's face went pale. You knew. All this time? I knew what you were. What your family did to successful women. How you trapped them, drained them, destroyed them. Leah wasn't just helping me gather evidence these past few years. She was helping me finish Dad's work. I walked to Brooke's chair and reached behind it, feeling for the hidden latch Dad had told me about years ago, the one Richard had shown him. A small panel in the wall clicked open. Richard didn't just keep evidence at the office, I said quietly. He kept his most damaging files right here, in his wife's favorite room, behind her favorite chair. watching her every day, waiting for the right moment. When he died, Dad took over. When they killed Dad, I stepped in. And now, suddenly, lights flooded the house from outside. Sirens wailed. Claire's voice came through a megaphone. FBI, the house is surrounded. Malcolm bolted for the door but was met by agents rushing in. Matthew lunged for the painting, but I was faster. I grabbed it and swung it hard, connecting with his jaw. He sprawled backwards, stunned more by the betrayal than the blow. Brooke remained seated, her face a mask of cold fury. "You won't win," she said softly. "You have no idea how far our influence reaches." I pulled out a final photo from my pocket and placed it in her lap. Her hands trembled as she recognized it. Richard and my father. But there was a third person in the photo. A young woman with wild, curly hair. "Kate," Brooke whispered. "Your own daughter." I nodded. "She didn't just start investigating 5 years ago. She's been part of this since the beginning. Everything she did, getting cut off from the family, starting her own business and letting you destroy it, it was all to make you feel safe, to keep you from looking too closely at her real work." As the FBI agents moved in with handcuffs, I picked up Leah's painting. By the way, there aren't any documents hidden in here. Leah's art was always just art. Beautiful, honest, real. Everything your family couldn't understand or control. But what happened next would prove that even I hadn't uncovered all the Harrison family secrets. Brooke's last words to me before they took her away would lead to one final revelation. One that would change not just my life, but the lives of every woman the Harrisons had ever victimized. As the FBI agents led Brooke toward the door, she stopped and turned to me. Her perfectly manicured hands were cuffed in front of her, but she maintained her regal posture. For a moment, I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen before. Respect. "You know," she said quietly, "you remind me of someone. A woman I used to be, before I made my choice." "What choice was that?" I asked, though part of me didn't want to know. "To become the predator instead of the prey." Brooke's smile was bitter. 30 years ago, I was you. A successful interior designer with my own business. Then I met Richard Harrison's father, Charles. He did to me exactly what we've done to others. Destroyed my business, isolated me, trapped me. Matthew, being handcuffed nearby, jerked his head up. "Mother?" But instead of fighting back, Brooke continued, ignoring her son, "I learned, I watched. And when Charles died, not accidentally, I assure you, I decided to turn his weapon against others. Richard never knew. He thought he'd married a society woman, never realizing I was recreating his father's scheme, making it more sophisticated, more profitable. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. You were the first victim. I was the last victim," she corrected, "and the first perpetrator. Every woman we targeted, every business we destroyed, I chose them because they were like me, strong, independent, capable. I couldn't stand to see them succeed where I had failed." Claire stepped forward, her FBI badge gleaming. "Mrs. Harrison, I suggest you save your confessions for your formal statement." But Brooke wasn't finished. "Check the foundations," she said, her eyes locked on mine. "Not the family foundation, the actual foundations. The lake house, the main house, all the properties. Charles taught Richard about keeping vaults, yes, but I taught Richard about keeping secrets, about building them into the very walls of our empire." A young FBI agent approached with a tablet. "Ma'am, we're finding something unusual in the thermal scans of the buildings. The basement here shows multiple hidden rooms." "Hidden rooms?" Matthew looked bewildered. "That's impossible. I know every inch of these houses." "Do you?" Brooke laughed softly. "You never questioned why we always used the same construction company for every renovation? Why certain areas were off limits during work? Richard thought he was so clever with his evidence, never realizing I had my own collection growing right under his feet. 30 years of secrets buried in concrete and steel. I thought about all the Harrison properties I'd helped redesign over the years, always working around structural limitations that Brooke had insisted couldn't be changed. "What's in those rooms?" "Everything," she said simply. "Every scheme, every victim, every crime. Not just ours, but going back to Charles's time. I kept it all. Insurance," I told myself. But really, she glanced at Matthew, something like regret crossing her face. Really, I think I was waiting. Waiting for what? Claire asked. For someone strong enough to end it. To do what I couldn't. Brooke straightened her shoulders. In my study at the main house behind the Monet, there's a safe. The combination is the date Charles died. Inside, you'll find a letter, written the day I realized I was pregnant with Matthew. Read it. You'll understand why it had to be you, Rebecca. As they led Brooke away, I turned to Claire. We need to get to that safe before anyone else does. The drive to the main Harrison house was a blur. The FBI team worked quickly, locating and opening the safe. Inside was a single envelope, yellowed with age, addressed simply, "To the one who ends it." What I read in that letter would reshape everything I thought I knew about Brooke, about the cycle of abuse and power, and about the true cost of revenge. But more importantly, it would show me the way forward. Not just for me, but for every woman the Harrisons had ever hurt. Because Brooke hadn't just been keeping evidence of crimes. She'd been keeping something far more valuable, the means to make everything right. The letter trembled in my hands as I read it in Brooke's study, Claire and Kate beside me. The paper was fragile with age, but the words were clear, written in a shakier version of Brooke's precise handwriting. To the woman who finally stops me. If you're reading this, you've done what I couldn't. You've chosen justice over power, healing over revenge. I write this sitting in my newly renovated study, feeling my unborn son move inside me, wondering what kind of mother I'll become. What kind of monster I already am. In the hidden rooms beneath every Harrison property, you'll find more than evidence. You'll find bank accounts, property deeds, and trust funds, a fortune built on broken dreams. Charles Harrison didn't just destroy businesses, he stole them, piece by piece, rebuilding his empire with the fragments of women's lives. I followed his template, perfected it, and in doing so, became something worse than my abuser. But I did something else too. Something neither Charles nor Richard ever discovered. For every business we destroyed, every woman we broke, I kept a separate set of records. Real records, showing the true value of what was stolen. And I did more than document. I duplicated. Every property deed, every account, every asset. I created shadow versions, all legally binding, all hidden away. With this letter, you'll find a key to a safety deposit box at First National Bank. Inside is everything you need to transfer it all back. Not just to return what was stolen, but to restore what was lost with 30 years of interest. I tell myself I kept these records as insurance, but the truth is simpler and harder to face. I kept them because some part of me, the part that died the day I chose power over justice, wanted someone to find them, wanted someone to be stronger than I was. You're reading this because you were that someone. Because you did what I couldn't. You fought back. You didn't let the abuse turn you into an abuser. You kept your humanity. Use it wisely. Use it better than I did. Brooke Harrison, April 15th, 1990. 3 months later, I stood in the newly renovated Harrison Foundation building, now the Eyes Open Foundation for Women's Economic Justice. The hidden rooms had yielded exactly what Brooke promised, the means to restore everything the Harrison family had stolen, with interest. But they'd revealed something else too, something Brooke hadn't mentioned in her letter. "Ready?" Kate asked, adjusting the sign above the building's entrance. I nodded, watching as women began arriving for the foundation's opening day. Many were familiar faces, Harrison victims, now survivors, each carrying their own stories of loss and resilience. But they weren't here just to receive restitution. They were here to help guide it, to ensure that what happened to them never happened to anyone else. Leah, now in remission thanks to proper treatment, stood beside me. The proper medical care, funded by the recovered assets, had reversed much of the damage done by the Harrisons' deliberate poisoning. Did you ever think, when you married Matthew, that it would end like this? No, I admitted, watching as Claire led a workshop on recognizing financial abuse. But I never thought Brooke would help us fix it either. That had been the final surprise in the hidden rooms. Journals, dozens of them, chronicling Brooke's struggle with what she'd become. The last entry, written the night before the restaurant confrontation, read simply, I see myself in Rebecca, but I see who I could have been, who I should have been. Perhaps it's not too late for one last choice. Matthew and Brooke both took plea deals, providing evidence that helped prosecute others involved in their schemes. Malcolm Jones turned state's witness. The Harrison empire crumbled, but something better rose from its ashes. Inside my office, once Brooke's study, Leah's lighthouse painting hung proudly. I understood now why she'd painted that double image, the truth above, reflecting a deeper truth below. Just like Brooke's final act had reflected her original self, the woman she'd been before fear and rage twisted her into something else. My phone buzzed, a text from Kate. Another one just came forward. A victim from Charles's time. She's ready to tell her story. I looked out my window at the women gathering below, each carrying their own light out of darkness. Brooke's final gift hadn't just been the means to restore what was stolen. It had been the chance to break a cycle of abuse that had spanned generations. "Coming," I texted back. Before leaving my office, I glanced one last time at the lighthouse painting. The sun in Leah's image was both rising and setting, depending on how you looked at it. An ending and a beginning, all at once. Just like that night in the restaurant, when a glass of wine meant to shame me had instead set me free. Sometimes the worst moments in our lives become doorways to our greatest purpose. Sometimes the deepest wounds can, when healed, become wellsprings of strength for others. And sometimes, even in the darkest stories, we find an unexpected light, not just to guide us home, but to help others find their way too.